this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about Erickson's stages of psychosocial development. And again, remember that psychosocial means that we're taking two things into account: the mind and the social interactions the child is having. And again, what we're developing here is parts or different parts of personality that occur as we get older. The first of Erickson's stages is trust versus mistrust, which occurs during infancy. And in trust versus mistrust, this is a lot like attachment, where the child has to, through the interactions with the parent, make a decision. Is this a world that I can trust, or is this a world that I cannot trust? Now, what's happening is that if mom and dad are good caregivers, if they, again, hug and kiss the baby, if they feed the baby when this baby's hungry, comfort the baby when the baby cries or is frustrated, that baby develops trust. And trust is a feeling of hope that things will turn out well, is a belief that other people want to help and that other people are trustworthy. And it follows you. If you develop trust in infancy, then in adulthood, you also have trust. And so this is the kind of person who trusts that things will turn out well. This is your friend who a stranger will tell them, like, hey, you want to go see my puppy in the van? And they'll go, yeah, of course I want to see puppies, because these people naturally trust others. And again, being too trusting can be a problem, but for the most part, we would like to be trustful of others, our friends and our family members, our bosses and coworkers. It's just sort of an easier life if you can trust others. But if mom and dad are not good at caregiving, if they don't feed baby when the baby's hungry, they don't change the diaper, they don't hug and kiss the baby, that baby might develop a sense of mistrust, a lack of hope, and a sense that things will always turn out the worst, that people are always going to let you down. These people are going to be more anxious, more insecure, and sort of lack trust in general. This is your friend who, you introduce him to a new person and they go, I don't really like that person. You know, they look like they're sinister or something like that. And you're like, well, there's no reason for you not to like this person. But they always have kind of a feeling that everybody else is trying to take advantage of them or trying to do things to hurt them, or that things are just not going to end up working out in general. Now, regardless of whether you develop trust or mistrust, eventually you're going to go to the next stage. The next stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt. And this happens in early childhood, about 1 to 3 years old. But I want to talk about it with the other two stages because they're very similar. So during 3 to 6 years old, you develop initiative versus guilt. And around 6 to 12, you will go through your industry versus inferiority stage. So these happens during middle and late childhood. The reason I talk about them together is because the dichotomy is kind of very similar. There is an aspect that if the child ends up feeling good, if the child is made to feel successful, they will develop the more positive trait. But if mom and dad or the school or their friends or family end up making them feel like failures, then the child will develop the more negative trait. And for these three traits, it has nothing to do with reality. It's only how they are made to feel, how the child is made to feel. If the kid wins the game, but mom and dad make the baby or the child feel like a failure, it doesn't matter that he won the game. The child feels like a failure. Um, or the opposite. If the child loses the game, but mom makes the child feel successful, then the child feels successful because these kids, they're too young to really make the connection between the real world and success or failure. They only understand how the adults in their life are treating them. During stage two, the child is going to develop autonomy or shame and doubt. Um, Children who develop autonomy are learning to uh, control their body, and they feel like successes at controlling their bodies. This is the little kid that says, let me cut the paper, let me stir the pot, right? Um, a big aspect of autonomy versus shame and doubt is potty training, being able to control your bowels and then release them when you're in the bathroom. Um, so again, when you develop autonomy, then you feel successful, and you feel like you have control over your own body and life. And so uh, uh, when this person gets older, they feel in control not only of themselves, but of their emotions, of their feelings. They feel independent. Um, but when they are made to feel like failures, right? When they say, let me cut the paper, and mom says, no, you're going to cut it wrong. Or mom lets the baby cut the paper and then says, you did it all wrong. Then the child's going to feel like a failure. The child goes potty on their pants, and mom says, you're always doing this, you blah, blah, blah. And the baby feels like a failure. Maybe mom lets the baby pick out all their clothes, and they pick a tutu and skates, and their friends make fun of them. And again, the baby or here, the child is going to feel like a failure. When that happens, then the child feels like they're not in control of their own body. And as they get older, they uh, they're always feeling shame when things go wrong. They always feel like they're to blame and that other people blame them. And so they are doubtful about trying new things. They don't want to try new things. They don't want to do things on their own. They only do things when they're told to do them. They tend to be dependent on other people, and they often tend to have lower self-esteem. Um, Now, again, eventually the child will get older and they'll enter initiative versus guilt, and the same dichotomy is here. When they're made to feel like a failure, they'll develop guilt. When they're made to feel like a success, they develop initiative. But in this stage, what's happening to the child is that the child wants to try adult things. And so they see big sister who plays the guitar and they want to play the guitar. And they see big brother playing basketball and they want to play basketball. They see dad playing with tools. They want to play with tools. They see mom, I don't know, doing her makeup and they want to put on makeup. When the child is made to feel successful, um, they develop a sense of initiative, a sense of, I know how to do things on my own. I don't need other people to tell me what to do. I don't need to wait for other people to give me directions. These people tend to have a feeling of having a purpose, especially as they get older. Um, and when they make mistakes, they don't really blame themselves. They go, yeah, mistakes happen. Oh, sorry, I did that. I'll do better next time. So they don't take on those mistakes quite as deeply. But when people make them feel guilty, they, you know, child picks up big sister's guitar and they go, no, you're going to break it. Or you're always doing stuff like this. Then the child might end up feeling guilt. And again, as they get older, what's going to happen is the child feels like a nuisance. They consistently feel that they're bad. Um, they're more likely to follow directions and follow others and not stand up for themselves, not do things on their own. Um, and again, they tend to be slow to interact with others. And of course, when they make a mistake, they assume it's their fault and they feel very guilty about that. And so again, they avoid doing things that are going to make them feel guilty. What you tend to get from both in both shame and doubt and guilt are people who are always waiting to be told what to do. Sometimes you have this happen at work. You give someone a task, hey, please do this, and they do exactly what you said, but then they don't do the next step. They don't clean up, or they don't, I don't know, print it out, or whatever the next step happens to be. Um, and you go, hey, how come you didn't do this last part? And they'll say, oh, well, no one told me to do that last part. Again, that's a good chance that this person either feels a great deal of shame and doubt, and so they're always doubtful about doing something because they don't want to feel bad about it, or they develop guilt, and anytime that they are something new, that they don't want to do it wrong, and so they avoid doing it. And then during stage 4, this is sort of school age. Um, and here the child is developing industry versus inferiority. Again, when the child feels successful, they develop industry. When they feel like a failure, they develop inferiority. Industry is not a word we use all the time, but industry means that a person feels like they do things because they want to do it. The reason I do my homework is because I want to do my homework. I want to feel successful. The reason I clean my room or my house is because I want to live in a clean house. I do it because I want to do it. I want to be good at it. I do my job well because I enjoy doing my job well. Okay. Um, and so, again, when you make the child feel uh, like a success at school, at their homework, with friends, then they develop industry. They become confident. They want to achieve goals, and they try to set up goals and then achieve them. And they sort of want to increase their potential, achieve their hidden potential. But when you make a child feel like a failure, then they develop inferiority. It's not just that they think like, oh, I did poorly at this. They think I'm the worst. Everybody's good at this except me. You know, don't even ask me to do that. I'm really bad at it. And in adulthood, what you'll sometimes find is that you know Johnny knows how to do this. You've seen him do it before. But you go, hey, Johnny, can you do this? And they go, no. Oh, I'm so bad at that. And you go, no, you're not. I've seen you do it well. They're like, no, I'm really bad at it. Right? Because these people always feel inferior, like they're not going to be good enough. They doubt their own abilities. And so they have a hard time reaching their full potential. I often like to make the point that this is the age where participation trophies work. Some people, if you watch, I don't know, stand up comedians, or you're on the internet a lot, you'll get this feeling that participation trophies are bad and that they, don't work. And they don't if you're talking about a teenager. If you're talking about a 15-year-old and you give a 15-year-old a participation trophy, they're going to feel belittled and they're going to feel patronized, and that's not going to work. But that's not who we're talking about. Participation trophies work for children who are in one of these 3 stages: autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, or industry versus inferiority. Why? Because the child doesn't know how to understand the real world. And all they care about is how the adults are treating him or her. And so you have a little kid playing soccer, and uh, they lose the game. They lose every game. And you would like this child to think the reason I lost is because I didn't play well enough. Or the reason I lost is because the other team made more runs or more goals. And so if I want to win, then I need to make more goals or I have to practice a little more. But that is incredibly complex for a 3-year old, a 5-year old, even a 12-year old to really follow. And so what ends up happening is that this child learns whenever I play this game, the adults treat me badly. That must mean that I am a failure. And depending on how old the kid is, they might develop shame and doubt or guilt or a sense of inferiority because all they care about, all they're focused on is how the adults are treating him or her. Now, when those participation trophies are presented, well, what ends up happening is that the child feels like a success. They have no idea that they didn't make the right amount of runs or goals or whatever the case is, baskets. They just think, oh, look, the adults think I did a good job. And so they feel like a success. Um, and so what ends up happening is that this child, when they're older, they're more likely to push through adversity. The GIF that you're seeing there is of Dominique Dawes, I believe, during one of the Olympics. She had a sprained ankle, but she still had one more um, event to do, which was vault there. And she pushed through and she got, I think, a perfect 10 there. But of course, as soon as she's done, she throws herself on the ground. And that kind of pushing through adversity will not happen if a child develops shame and doubt, if a child develops guilt, or if a child develops inferiority, because they feel I'm no good, or I don't want people to judge me, or I am doubtful that I can do this, or that people will think that I did it well. So they just avoid doing it altogether. Where if you make the child feel autonomous or have initiative or have industry, then when they, in adulthood, when a real problem presents itself, they're more likely to push through adversity and try to do the best that they can. We all kind of understand this at sort of an instinctual level, right? Every once in a while, a little kid will show you a picture that they drew and they'll say, and this is a tree, and this is my big brother, and this is mom and dad. And you could say to this little kid, well, that doesn't look anything like your mom or dad, and that certainly doesn't look like a tree there. But none of us do that because we all kind of instinctively know that we don't want to destroy this kid's um, self-esteem and give them sort of, a complex or an issue with their personality because we want them to push harder. We want them to try harder as they get older. What we assume, though, is that, especially in sports, that a kid needs to learn how to fail. And yeah, listen, this is true of that 13-year-old, of that 15-year-old. We all need to learn how to fail. But in childhood, kids don't understand that failure has anything to do with the number of points you made. They attach failure to how people see them and whether or not people love them or not. And so it's better to give a participation trophy to someone who lost, or to say to your kid, hey, you did an amazing job out there. I'm so proud of you. Because you don't want any little obstacle to make them quit. And that's exactly what happens if you make them feel shameful, if you make them feel guilty, or if you make them feel inferior to others. So now in adolescence, you will go through what we call identity versus role confusion. And again, you still have two aspects of personality that you might develop, but here it's a little bit different. When you are an adolescent, especially when you are first starting out, if you're a preteen, let's say, uh, you start to try and figure out who you are as a person. If you're younger than around maybe 11, if I go, hey, Johnny, what makes little Johnny Johnny? Johnny is not going to give me a great answer. He's going to say, um, I like playing video games, and my best friend is Tom, and I live in 123 Main Street. They're going to be very categorical kind of ways of expressing who they are. But by the time that they're 11 and 12, they're going to say more complex things. They're going to say things like, I'm a nice person. Some people like me, but maybe some people don't like me so much. um, there is they're starting to think about who they are on the inside. And what they'll start to do is they'll start to try different things. They'll hang out with some friends and then others, and maybe they'll try a club or a sport. And at first, they'll develop very basic aspects of a personality. They will, I don't know, wear they'll dress in a specific way, and they'll say things like, well, I dress this way because I like playing Pokemon, and people who play Pokemon dress this way. Or I play sports because I like FIFA, and people who play sports like FIFA or something like that. And as they get older, sometimes it becomes a little bit more complex, but you still kind of get these weird connections where, like, all of the goth kids dress a certain way, and they all listen to the same music, and they all, I don't know, like the same kind of poetry. All of the jocks dress the same way, and they wear similar clothes, and blah blah blah. Um, and every once in a while, you will see a goth kid, and maybe dad forces him to play or to try out for the team, and he gets in. And you would think that he would still be a goth kid who just happens to play football, but that's not often what happens, especially not in middle school and not in the 9th, 10th grade. You're not going to see that. What you're going to see is that Tommy, who was a goth, now is a jock. And he doesn't listen to the music he used to listen to. He doesn't hang out with his goth friends anymore. He doesn't, you know, write poetry anymore. Now he only hangs out with the jocks, and he listens to their music, and he, I don't know, watches scary movies. Um, because essentially what this person is doing, they're trying to come up with a personality, and because they're not 100% sure of who they are, they just kind of pick something at random. And at random means whatever their friends are into. Hopefully, by the time that they're getting to be juniors and seniors, their personality is more in line with who they want to be. And they can, kind of mix and match. And they might say, hey, I really like this music that the goths listen to, but also I like to play football, right? And that's a slightly more complex identity. Um, but not everyone is capable of doing this. And if you don't do this well, then you end up with what we sometimes call role confusion. And role confusion can take different aspects. Some people kind of get lost in the crowd. And so, sometimes their friends are really into, I don't know, MMA or boxing. And so they're super into MMA and boxing. And then maybe they get really into it and they wear the clothes and they only watch um, fights on TV, etc. But then maybe they lose track of those friends, and now their friends are really into country music. And now they buy the hat and the boots, and they just yesterday they were really into this MMA fighting thing, and it just feels like just overnight their entire personality, their entire identity shifted, and now they're really into country music and they're completely different people. And then maybe, in a couple of years it'll change again and they're super into something else. um, because this person doesn't really know who they are. And what they end up doing is they become whoever their friends are or whoever their romantic partner happens to be. And this person doesn't really know, they don't have a good sense of identity. Now, it could be a little bit different. Role confusion could sometimes be that, I don't know who I am, but I happen to know that I'm a man. And so I'm not a woman. And so therefore I don't do anything that girls do. And I won't drink the woman's tea because it says woman's tea, even though it's the exact same tea that the guy tea is, but it says woman. And so I don't drink that. Or I have to sign some papers and someone gives me a frilly pen with a unicorn on the top and I kind of get angry at them. Why would you give me this pen? I'm a man and men don't write with these kinds of pens. I've seen people, I don't know, they won't drink a certain kind of drink like an apple teeny because it's like a feminine drink. And like, who cares? Like it tastes good and it'll get you just as drunk. But no, somehow it sort of demeans who they what their identity is, and so they can't do it. Um, uh, Again, this is sort of a role confusion. Obviously, this is not the kind of identity we want to develop. We want to develop an identity that is flexible and that is in line with who we are, with our values, with our goals. And yeah, if we try something new, we might discover that we like something new, but we don't change our entire identity based on that. We just happen to realize that, hey, this is something fun that I could try every once in a while. I always like to point out also that even people with a sense of identity can sometimes go through an identity crisis when they're older. Maybe when you're 40, you thought of yourself as a fun loving person and an exciting person, and maybe you're always thought of yourself as funny, but you're 40 now, and when you think back, you go, man, I'm not really so funny, and I don't do things that are adventurous, and it makes you feel like I'm not really who I think I am. And all of a sudden, you might feel the need to go back to that middle school way of thinking and start trying a bunch of new things. Maybe go out more, buy a motorcycle, get a weird haircut. Um, uh, Sometimes the crisis is because of something really specific. I'm a husband. I always thought of myself as a husband, but now I got a divorce and I can't think of myself as a husband anymore. And so again, I go through a crisis of identity. And I could fix that really easily by marrying somebody else. And now I'm a husband again. But if I don't do that, then I have this hole in my sense of identity. And again, maybe I go get my ears pierced or I buy a new car, something to fill in that hole, to fill my sense of identity. Maybe I'll start becoming more religious and I fill that hole with religion. And uh, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. But to someone who knew you well, what it looks like is like you used to be one person and now you're somebody else. You act very differently. And sometimes that can be difficult for other people to deal with. But it's not necessarily a bad thing so long as you overcome it. Okay, so now most of you are probably entering your intimacy versus isolation. This is going to be young adulthood. So your late teens and into your 20s. And of course, what you're looking for here is to find someone to commit to in a relationship. And so we call this intimacy versus isolation. In young adulthood, you enter intimacy versus isolation. And what is happening here is that you're looking for someone to develop a relationship with. But you can have a relationship and still feel isolated. What matters is that this person that you have a relationship with, you feel like they're your partner. You feel like you and me, we're in this together. And if something goes bad for me, I can count on you. And if something goes bad for you, you can count on me. We're going to make it together. And what you're going to find is that some people have relationships, they're married, they might even have kids, but they don't think of their partner uh, as someone that they can confide in, as someone that they can feel they are intimate with. They're just their sexual partner and romantic partner, and they don't really feel like you and me, we're in this together. And so they're going to feel a sense of isolation. They'll feel like I don't have anybody in this world that cares about me. I don't have anybody in this world that I can count on. Um, when you do have that person, then you have developed a sense of intimacy and you feel like you have a partner that you can count on. Now, there's a lot of cultural issues with this stage. The main one being that people get married at very different ages now than they used to. It used to be you got out of high school and you were getting married. And if you could go further back in time, and uh, there was, a time where if you were, you know, 15 or 16, you were married. And if you were in your 20s and you weren't married, people would say things like, you're an old maid, uh, and no one is going to want to marry you. Well, clearly, those things don't matter anymore. And in fact, because of cultural issues and issues with the economy, a lot of people wait a lot longer to get married. And so in the 70s, you started to see that women were starting to get married in their 20s, men, by the time that they were 23. By 2007, that changes. Women, the mean age is 25, and for men, the mean age is 27. And today, those numbers are only going up because a lot of people want to wait till they finish college, till they have a degree, till maybe they buy a house before they start to think about finding a partner. Another issue with culture here is that for intimacy versus isolation, what counts as intimacy changes. If you go back to the 50s, women wanted a man who had a job and would provide and, you know, came home after work and spent some time with the kids. And that's what mattered to her. And men were looking for someone to take care of the kids and keep a clean house. And so long as that's what you both wanted, then you felt like you had a partner. Um, and even though that woman never watched sports with you and that man never went shopping with you, that didn't matter to you because that it wasn't what you were looking for. You were looking for a partner that met those cultural expectations. Fast forward to today, well, those things don't matter as much. Women aren't looking for a man to take care of them because they can take care of themselves. And men aren't looking for a woman who can take care of babies because they can take care of babies too. And so, what usually most people are looking for in a partner is someone that will do things with them, that will watch the game, that will go out shopping, that they can go on adventures together with, um, and so that's what you're looking for. Uh, so again, what it means to be intimate changes because of culture. What doesn't change is that we're looking for someone to feel intimate with. Now, in middle adulthood, you enter what we call generativity versus stagnation. In stage 7, um, what starts to happen is you start to feel this need to teach other people the things that you already know. And more specifically, to teach someone who's younger than you the things that you already know. That's what generativity is, a desire to give back to the generation that comes after you. Well, if you have a couple of kids or some grandkids, great. There you go. You could teach them to play catch, or teach them how to put on makeup, or you can teach them how to fix the car or how to do the taxes. Um, because you have ready set kids that uh, are going to listen to you. But if you don't have kids, or maybe you had kids a little bit too young or too late and they didn't quite fit in your generativity stage, then you still have this need. You will look for other people to whom you could teach what you already know. And so sometimes you'll see this, especially at work. Some older person will take you kind of under their wing. And it's not just that they're teaching you how to do the job, they always like give you extra advice, and they tell you, oh, when I went through that, I did this and this went wrong. So you shouldn't do that. You should try doing this other way. Because what they're trying to do is overcome this feeling of generativity so that they can feel like they're giving back to the generations that come after them. When you are unable to do this, then you develop a sense of stagnation, a feeling that my life wasn't really worth anything. I didn't give back to anyone. And so you kind of feel stuck, like there's nothing to do, like life doesn't really matter. Now, finally, you will get to late adulthood. And in late adulthood, you enter what we call ego integrity versus despair. Now, what's happening here is that you look back at your life. And sometimes you look back at your life and you think, hey, you know what? Things were pretty good. I did things mostly right, or I overcame struggles mostly well. And so now that you're older, you feel like, I want to keep on living. I want to keep on enjoying my life. And so what you see is people who are older, but they're still going out. They're still trying to make friends. If they don't have a partner anymore, then they want to date. They want to find new relationships, um, or they want to go out and do things that are fun. Uh, when people look back at their life and they feel like their life wasn't really worth anything, or they feel like they didn't really overcome their struggles, well, they might fall into despair. And when you fall into despair, what happens is you start to think about death way too much, and you start to, again, think that nothing really matters. And for a lot of older people, this usually means that they just kind of sit around and just kind of wait to die. They get sick faster. They get tired very easily, and they just really don't seem to be enjoying their old age. It's important to point out that when you're in your late 60s, 70s, 80s, everybody thinks about death. You have to. It's so close uh, to where you are in life that everybody thinks about death. But if you have ego integrity, you try to overcome that by enjoying your life. Where if you fall into despair, you can't really let go of those negative feelings, and the negative feelings kind of win out.